Come on in, come on in.
I feel like it's a couple.
Maybe one or two.
Right now, yeah.
If I focus on the content, if you focus more on the content,
Cool. Good to see you.
All right, thanks everybody. This is exciting. So, I am obsessed with zombies. So who here, who are my people? Woo! There we go. All right. So I'm obsessed with zombies, and I also do a lot of work around climate change. And I've realized that there are a lot of parallels between these two things, and it's probably the reason I'm obsessed with both of them. So this is what led me to this thesis that I'm going to present today, which is that there are lessons we can learn today from the zombie apocalypse of tomorrow. So I was actually surprised that there weren't more hands that went up about zombie enthusiasm. So for those that did not raise your hand, zombies are caused by a virus. And they cause dead people to animate, right, and stumble around and bite people. Right? And once you bite someone, well, once a zombie bites someone, that someone becomes another zombie. So now we have two zombies stumbling around, biting people. Four zombies stumbling around, biting people. Pandemic, right? So nationwide, pretty much instantly. And this has been proven, actually, by infectious disease researchers. So this is a real scientific paper that was submitted. This is like the actual citation. So this was submitted to an infectious disease publication where they used a standard infectious disease spreading algorithm and added the Z to the equation and calculated exactly how long it would take for the zombie plague to actually spread to the extent that we see in these zombie stories, right? So in the zombie stories, it all pretty much happens like instantly, right? It's like over the course of 3 days, which coincidentally is what the mathematics prove. So in 3 days, we get these tiny little bands of survivors, and everyone else it has been eaten or turned into a zombie. So this is all kind of the background of where we're at. So in all of these zombie stories, right? I mean, I've read comics, I've read books, I've played video games, I've watched movies, I've done simulations, I've done trainings. I took a course. I'm a member of the Zombie Research Society. I did that for the t-shirt though. So I've done all the study, right? And I found 5 things that are parallels to climate change. So we're gonna walk through them. Top 5 risks. And we see it in both climate change and in the zombie story. So number 1 is a collapse of infrastructure. So no gasoline, no electricity, no running water. And this is pretty much the first couple pages of every zombie story, and we're seeing this with climate change as well. So in the zombie stories, anybody recognize this? This is from issue number 1 of The Walking Dead. Right? So main character gets in a car, runs out of gas, finds a gas station's out of gas. Zombie enthusiasts, where are we? What movie is this from? Somebody shout it out, come on.
28 days.
28 days? Oh wait. This is in New York after Hurricane Irene. Oops. Right, this is happening. Power outages, right? Our infrastructure is so fragile that a little branch falls and hits a power line and it knocks out power for all of New York all the way to Toronto. And what do we do when that happens? Oh, it's dark out. What do we do? I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know. Right? We're completely unprepared for our infrastructure to collapse. And it's really, really close. So in the zombie stories, they learn really quickly that they can't rely on that infrastructure anymore. So living local, right? The radius of survival shrinks. You can't just get in the car and drive forever to go get more supplies. Capturing water, actually capturing the water that falls and using that to drink it. Using the sun, in the winter, using the sun to keep warm, and in the summer, staying out of the sun to stay cool. And these are strategies that we're using every day in our work. So a little bit difficult to see, but so these are projects that we're working on in our office where they're generating their own energy, they're capturing rainwater, they're using materials that are locally sourced, they're engaging the community and really building community around them. And we're looking at ways of starting to integrate growing food into these projects as well, which leads to risk number 2. Our food system is as fragile and as complex as all of these other infrastructure systems. So our food system is just one more system that as soon as the electricity goes out and the water goes out, the food system follows right behind it. So we see this as a challenge in the zombie stories, and we're seeing this with climate change as well. So in the zombie stories, what this does is it means that our little band of survivors has to go further and further out to find a grocery store that has anything left in it in order to scavenge it. So as you go further and further out in a world that's infested with zombies, you expose yourself to more and more and more risk, right? So they've learned really quickly that that's not tenable. Now in real life, or maybe a zombie movie, anybody? Want to take a risk? No? So in real life, this is Madrid after 3 days. This is a grocery store in Madrid. 3 days of a trucker strike that blocks supplies coming from France into Spain. 3 days, shelves are bare. So it's really fragile, and it's being impacted by climate change. So this is an image of the California drought that's happening right now. In 2011, there was a drought in Europe that knocked out 80% of the wheat crop. So California, this chunk right here, that's the extreme, never before seen drought where they're creating new colors to add to the chart. Exceptional drought. It's like 4 years behind in rain. That's where we get, oranges, strawberries, cabbage, lettuce, all of the food that we are importing, tomatoes, all of this stuff is coming from, a lot of it, from California. So our food system is really fragile. Solution from the zombie stories. Well, let's start growing food. Let's grow it locally, right? Let's band together, create community gardens. They learn to hunt, they learn to can, they eat local and seasonal food. And this, of course, is what we're doing for all of our sustainability initiatives, right? I talked about growing food on some of these projects. We're working on, community gardens, food co-ops. This is like a high-density hydroponic system that's growing food down in New York. So the same solution, right, to the same risk. Okay, so the next one is a realization that our population centers actually become really, really dangerous, right? Because the more people there are, the more zombies there are. So everyone realizes this really quickly, right? And this is, again, the first 3 days of the zombie apocalypse, right? Everybody gets in the car, tries to get on the highway, tries to drive out of town. You see images like this, right, in all of the zombie movies. Our protagonists are surrounded in a city. The highways are clogged with cars that have broken down and run out of gas because the infrastructure isn't there anymore. And they need to find a way to get out. The other thing that they find is, in real life, we've seen issues where we needed to evacuate entire cities, and we don't do it well at all, right? So this is New Orleans. This is Back Bay. If Hurricane Sandy had hit Boston at high tide instead of hitting New Jersey. So where would you go if we had to evacuate Boston? Do you know? Anybody? Does anybody have a plan?
To that stadium.
Yeah.
Somerville is higher ground.
Yeah. The stadium. That's a great question, because is the stadium prepared for you? This is New Orleans, right? Their stadium was not prepared for all of the refugees. So part of this question is, we see this now because, more and more hurricanes, more and more severe storms, more and more often where we need to start thinking about how do we evacuate a city, how do we keep populations safe. So in the stories, the lesson that we learn here, they learn really quickly that, if without power, we also have no communication, right? So there's two things that happen here. One is they plan ahead, and they don't wait for the disaster, because if you're separated from your group, you have no way of knowing how to get in touch with them, right? So they have a plan ahead of time. This is what we're going to do, this is where we're going to go, this is what we're going to meet, or where we're going to meet. And they also plan their communities, their little safe havens, to take on more survivors. They know that there's going to be people elsewhere who are trying to find safe haven as well. And so they plan for increased population, refugees, and they have communication plans set out. So again, we're seeing this in real, thankfully, we're starting to see this work come to fruition in practice as well. So the city of Boston is working on resiliency plans, and the city of New York is working on them, the city of Cambridge is working on them, studying what the risks really are, what's the actual risk of flooding, of hurricane, of needing to evacuate, and then thinking through where people need to go, how it would be communicated. The Rockefeller Foundation is the image on the left, is doing a ton of great work, focusing the conversation. They've got a four-pillared system. Only one of them deals with infrastructure. The other three are dealing with the resiliency of the community itself. Does the community have a network in place that's going to actually help neighbors, which is really, really critical in these times of crisis. Okay, so the fourth major risk that we see here is when we start to see a breakdown of kind of a rule of law, and people get desperate. So despair becomes a really, really dangerous threat in both of these scenarios. So in the zombie stories, our survivor group, they figure out pretty quickly how to handle the zombies. I mean, let's be honest, the zombies are pretty dumb. They're really slow. They're really easy to take out. If you take them out one by one, you can lead them around. They can't open doors. They just pound on them, right? They're not that dangerous anymore. Other survivors become the real threat, right? Especially the ones that are desperate. The ones that are desperate to have what you have and will do desperate things, dangerous things, right? So this becomes the major threat, much more so than the original disaster. And we're seeing this, unfortunately, today, right? So climate change has caused, there's been a huge, huge drought in Syria, right? And Syria had a huge agricultural industry, and that industry has completely collapsed. So you have an entire population that has no access to their livelihood anymore. And a lot of them are now being supported by extremist groups, being recruited by extremist groups, basically being given a job, right? And so this is one of the major recruiting tools that these groups are using. And it's directly tied to the drought. So in these, the lesson here, the lesson that we take away from it, the positive thing, if we realize that despair is actually more dangerous than the original disaster, then we can actually work to address the inequalities that cause it. So in the zombie stories, they actually figure that out and start to work to trade with other groups. They make it so that they negotiate, they trade supplies, they make it so that everyone is able to survive, so that this inequality doesn't boil over into a situation that becomes more dangerous. So this is kind of a snapshot of some of the work that I'm working on to address these inequalities that we're facing today, too, right? So this label on the left is for a social justice label for organizations. So looking at gender equity inside organizations, racial diversity inside organizations, pay gaps, family leave policies, those kinds of issues. The image in the upper left is intentionally blurry. That is an execution chamber. So we are working right now to campaign the American Institute of Architects. I've got I'm on the board of an organization called ADPSR, and we've got a petition to the AIA, which is the Professional Organization of Architects, to ask them to revise the Professional Code of Ethics for Architects to say that an AIA architect will never design an execution chamber. So this would bring the AIA up to par with the American Medical Association, the American Nursing Association, the psychologists, psychiatrists, on down the line. They're meeting today to make their decision, and so if you are interested in this topic, please come and talk to me afterwards, and I would love to amp up the conversation around that initiative. And the last image on the bottom left is working through a green building rating system called LEED, and trying to integrate social equity issues into that rating system. So looking at things like worker pay, worker safety, worker training, community engagement, and really trying to drive a conscious effort around designing for equity in the work that we're doing today. All right. So the last risk that we see here is, of course, the roaming packs of the living dead. So obviously this is critical for a zombie apocalypse, otherwise it's just an apocalypse. We've not seen this yet, thankfully, due to climate change. Right? But the real question here, the root of this is, how do we make sure that we're part of this upper tier, right? How do we make sure that we're the survivors and not the walkers? What do we need to do? So, not a trick question, the zombie fanatics, how do you handle zombies?
You shoot him in the head.
Bash him in the head. Destroy the brain, right? So that works really well in the zombie lore. But the real question is, if you were faced with this street and you had to get down that street by yourself, and you were trying to bash each one of these in the head by yourself, you wouldn't make it, right? The only way to get down this street is with a group of survivors that's going to work together, right? So the only answer to this is this. A community of people all working together, driving for the solution, right? So one of the things for me that I take away from this, if we look at these 5 solutions, we're living local energy, local food, local water, capture water, preparing for refugees, preparing for disasters. We're working to make sure that despair doesn't become more dangerous, working for equity, and we're destroying the brain in the zombie apocalypse, not in climate change, right? Because the big lesson here, the big thread through all of this, the thing that got me started thinking about this is, so remember the study, right? 3 days, and the zombie stories, it all happens in 3 days. You have all of these things happening, right? The infrastructure collapses, we've got panic, we've got no food, no water. It all happens right in one spot, in one city. And we're seeing all of those things in real life, right? But it's over there, and it's separated by a month or 2. And so it's really easy to just ignore the pattern. But if it was all happening in one city, in one place, at one time, we would be doing things differently, right? But right now, because of this separation, we kind of continue business as usual. But if the zombie horde was walking down the street, we would be doing things differently, right? So part of what I'm trying to do with this presentation is draw that parallel so that we really, really start to act with the urgency that we need to on climate change that we would if there was a zombie horde outside. So, thank you.